targets when inspecting scenes compared to Western participants. That's pretty low-level stuff. We are generally not even aware of how we control our eye movements. So how could culture shape these? We're generally not, that's pretty low level stuff. We're generally not even aware of how we control our eye movements. So how could culture shape these? Section, how does development shape the way we see the world? How could people from the East and West see the world so differently? One possibility is that brain plasticity enables the developing brain to conduct relevant experiences. One possibility is that brain plasticity enables a developing brain to encode relevant experiences to shape the way we see faces and hear languages. Nisbet believes that the same developmental process shapes the way we pay attention to things in the world. The world is full of complexity, ambiguity, and missing information. A blooming, buzzing confusion, as William James once wrote. We make sense of it by organizing the information into meaningful patterns. Much of this happens automatically as part of the package we inherit through our genes as the organizing brain processes. Much of this happens automatically as part of the package we inherit through our genes as the organizing brain processes that generate our perceptions. Sitting atop these built-in perceptual processes is cognition, the higher order operations that guide perception. Cognition organizes, see that's great, refer to cognition like that, rather than as the self, the control, okay, shut the fuck up. Sitting atop these built-in perceptual processes is cognition, the higher order operations that guide perception. Cognition organizes our thinking and gets better at this as we become more expert at noticing the regularities of the world and remembering them. This leads us to form expectations so that we can predict events. For example, if we know what to expect next from previous encounters, we can look out for familiar patterns. That's why foreign games of sport can seem so disorganized to those unfamiliar with the rules. In addition to our built-in rules for learning about the world, the most important source of expertise is other people. We have previously described how babies are tuned into other people from the very beginning. Nisbet believes that our early interactions with adults also shape the way we view the world. For example, Western and Eastern mothers interact and talk to their infants in different ways. U.S. mothers are much more likely to engage in play that involves naming individual toys. Japanese mothers are more likely to engage their children in social games. In one study, U.S. and Japanese mothers were observed interacting with their children with the same toys. U.S. mothers were twice as likely to label toys and focus the child's attention on the attributes of each item. In contrast, Japanese mothers did label the object, but they were much more likely to then engage the child with exchange games such as, I give it to you, now you give it to me. Even the languages in these different cultures emphasize differently the individual from the relational properties of items. Can I tell you something really, really embarrassing? And it just goes to show the mind isn't integrated. Here's a little piece of anecdotal evidence. When I did not know the Chinese word for eye in high school, I don't think. But I thought I overheard a senior talking to a teacher, another student talking to a teacher about something interesting about linguistics that they were researching or learning about. And that what they had learned was that in Chinese no, he was Chinese, I think. Or was he Singaporean? But maybe he was Chinese still. Or it was like Malaysian, like Chinese. Anyway. and I remember the way I recall it is that he said to my French teacher that in his language or in Chinese there's no word for I. That the reference is always or about the relationship. Now there's some sort of So here's what's kind of what I feel pretty sure is true. First of all, I don't know what I got wrong, whether it was the language or what the actual sort of fact was about the word I. But I have in other since then come across research that or read stuff or that talked about like the way that not just this stuff about the way we describe ourselves and whether we use relationships, but uh, it's or is it like a direct object? Is there something about that? Like rather than saying you give this to me, you say like you give this to your father and I'm your father. I don't remember. Anyway, just the embarrassing thing is that at some point in my life I did learn how to say the word I in Chinese. And I never connected the two things. So although I know that I is wo, or however you pronounce it, I continued to talk about to say to people, and there's no and then I connected the two things just like this year or last year and was terribly embarrassed and thought we would enjoy that story. So the US mothers, they're labeling toys, focusing the child's attention on the attributes. Japanese mothers like, yo, I give it to you, now you give it to me. Or she's like, give it to you, now you give it to. Even the languages in these different cultures emphasize differently the individual from the relational properties of items. This may explain why Eastern children are delayed in learning to sort objects into different categories compared to Western children. Categories, bro. And the Western children, by the way, are comparatively more skilled at considering the properties of individual objects as opposed to grouping them together. This may explain why Eastern children are delayed in learning to sort objects into different categories compared to Western children, who are comparatively more skilled at considering the properties of individual objects as opposed to grouping them together. That I don't understand what that means. These differing ways of categorizing the world reflect the way that children can learn to adopt the prevalent social norms. But this learning is not set for life, as are other critical period phenomena. These ways of processing the world do not satisfy the biological imperatives that require hardwiring. It seems unlikely that there are going to be significant permanent differences between individuals who view the world from collectivist or individualistic perspectives. I'm repeating, these differing ways of categorizing the world reflect the way that children can learn to adopt the prevalent social norms. But this learning is not set for life, as are other critical period phenomena. These ways of processing the world do not satisfy the biological imperatives that require hardwiring. It didn't need to be in the genes. It wasn't like that big of a deal that we do this or that, like that we categorize or not. So it's in the cultural genes, but those are much more malleable. It seems unlikely that there are going to be significant permanent differences between individuals who view the world from collectivist or individualistic perspectives. More importantly, these differing perspectives are easily reversible, suggesting that they are not cast in stone. For example, European and American students were asked to circle either independent pronouns, I or mine, or interdependent pronouns, we or ours. Those primed with independent pronouns gave higher endorsements to individualistic statements, whereas those primed with interdependence gave higher endorsement to collectivist values. Clearly, such manipulations reveal that we are much more malleable to conforming to group norms rather than holding deep-seated notions about group. Clearly, such manipulations reveal that we are much more malleable to conforming to group norms rather than holding deep-seated notions about group and self-identity. Also, if you prime Hong Kong residents who have grown up under the influence of both Western and Eastern cultural perspectives, you can shift their attitudes toward collectivist perspective if you show them an image of the Chinese dragon, or shift them toward individualism with a picture of the US flag. In one study, groups of bicultural Hong Kong Chinese were primed with either Eastern or Western attitudes and then told about an overweight boy who could not resist the temptation to gorge on food. Those who were primed with Western, like, that piece of shit. Those who were primed with Eastern, yeah, we gotta change that situation. That's what I'm guessing. They were then asked to rate how much of his weight problem was due to his own disposition and how much was due to his social circumstances. Both groups were equal on rating the boy's obesity as due to his own problems of self-control, but those primed with the Chinese icons rated his situational circumstances significantly higher than those primed with the U.S. flag. Section, Who Am I? These studies reveal that the vast body of evidence undermines the notion of a core self, but rather supports the self-illusion. These studies reveal that the vast body of evidence undermines the notion of a core self. You know what? He's Scottish. This "but rather" thing, it's really throwing me off. I'm realizing I think it's a foreign thing to me. I'm probably, because it just does not sound like what it's supposed to mean to me. Okay. I'm going to read, sorry. These studies reveal that the vast body of evidence undermines the notion of a core self and instead supports the self-illusion. Or is there like a negation missing? I don't understand. If we are so susceptible to group pressure, subtle priming cues, stereotyping, and cultural cueing, then the notion of a true, unyielding ego self cannot be sustained. Shut the fuck up. If it is a self that flinches and bends with tiny changes in circumstances, then it might as well be non-existent. Most humans entertain some form of self-illusion, but it is one that is shaped by context. For many in the West, their self-illusion... most humans entertain some form of a self-illusion, but it is one that is shaped by context. For many in the West, their self-illusion is characterized by the individual fighting against the odds, whereas in the East, the most common form of the self-illusion will be the team player. If these different types of selves were intrinsic, then they should not be so easily modified by context. Right. More sort of genetic something, lower brain structure, it is like the less malleable cortex is super plastic, because we evolved this capacity to learn a bunch of stuff. Anyway. Note that both ways of seeing the world, and more importantly, one's self-illusion, require some form of public validation. Both require the presence of others. It is worth pointing out a lesson to be learned. In this day and age, when we increasingly need to share our limited living space on the planet, most people entertain a belief that they are considerate, reasonable, and fair. Shut the fuck up. Not many would readily accept that they are prejudiced, unreasonable, and racist. However, we can easily harbor many stereotypes and distortions that shape the way that we behave and think. We are certainly more pliable through the influence of others than we ever thought. If we wish to be fair and just individuals, I think a good starting alternative is to accept that prejudice may be the norm and not the exception, and is inherent in group psychology, as Teufel and others claimed. The first, Teufel. The first step to fixing our problem is acknowledging that you have one to begin with. And so long as we entertain a self-illusion, we are not going to accept just how much external circumstances have shaped us in the past and continue to exert an influence throughout our lives. We don't see this because our cognitive dissonance is constantly shielding us from our failings by trying to maintain an integrated self, or as we would say in a theory, an integrated self-belief, an idealized story of who we think we are. By the way, there is a gorilla next to the pencils. I think we did a very good job today. But don't be like, oh yeah, bravo, because I still want to believe that you do like when I talk. I almost want you to say, oh man, we missed all the tangents and repetitions and stories. And if you say that, I'll continue to try to restrain myself. Well, how's that for a deal? Echo 25, Foxtrot 1914. So the thing is, my computer is exporting some reading from this actually, and once my dad comes, I'm gonna have a lot of time to edit. I don't know how much many opera. Why the fuck would that do that? Why would the screen dim? It's getting hot, huh? Is it charging? Hold on. Anyway, 24 Echo 25 Foxtrot. Anyway, that's what I would have said. That I don't know what I just said, but the point is, can we read some more? It doesn't matter what I was gonna say. We're just gonna start reading now. Wait, I was gonna say something about the reading now. Before. Whatever. Okay, chapter 7. The stories we live by. I looked around. It was like a horror movie. People were mounted on each other. The smell of burnt skin and people's insides was gagging. I kept thinking about my fiance, about our wedding. I wanted to wear that white dress and swear my love for him. Something gave me the strength to get up. I believed today that it was my fiance on his way to heaven. I don't understand. Was he in purgatory? I looked around. It was like a horror movie. People were mounted on each other. The smell of burnt skin and people's insides was gagging. I kept thinking about my fiance, about our wedding. I wanted to wear that white dress and swear my love for him. Sometimes something gave me the strength to get up. I believe today that it was my fiance on his way to 9/11. Okay, sorry, I misunderstood. Okay, I got you. Tanya Head. That's who said that. Who can forget the day they saw the attack on the Twin Towers? Flashbulb memories. Let's go. This book's just hitting a lot of the classics. Yeah, that's why I don't have anything to say. I've talked about it. Who can forget the day they saw the attack on the Twin Towers? You didn't even have to be there. It was the first live televised terrorist atrocity witnessed by the world. I was at work in Bristol, England, and recently had a television mounted on my office wall, which I used to review research videos. But that afternoon, I had it turned on to watch the horror unfold on that crisp, sunny September morning in New York. It was surreal. It couldn't be happening. I remember trying to be disconnected from it, as if it was just another piece of news. I did not want to think too hard about what I was seeing. And yet I will not forget that day. It is seared into the memory of all who witnessed the events that have simply become known as 9/11. Shut the fuck up. That seems rude to say now after I'm alone. I was a kid. I felt like an adult knowing about the news. So I wasn't usually like interested in the news or learning about the news or whatever. But this major world event happened, And me and the class, we were watching it, so naturally, when my parents picked me up, they said, "Hey, what's going on?" I said, "Not nothing. How you guys doing?" And they go, "Well, you heard about what happened?" I said, "Oh yeah, that's so yesterday's news. I know all about news. I'm a news boy. That was this morning, bro. I'm such a news boy that feels like a lifetime ago, bro." And I don't think my parents really said anything that, no, I think, yeah, maybe one of them said something. They're like, "It's a fucking terrible thing to say." I was like, "Oh, oops." As discussed, memories are not recordings, but stories we retrieve from the compost heap that is our long-term memory. We construct these stories to make sense of the events we have experienced. They change over time as they become distorted, merged, turned over, mixed in, and mangled with other experiences that eventually fade. But some memories remain as vivid as the day they happened, or at least they seem so. These episodes that refuse to decompose. These are the events that we can't forget. When we witness something that is truly terrifying, then a memory can be branded into our brain like a hot searing iron that marks our minds forever. This is because when is he going to tell us this is bullshit? This is because emotionally charged memories are fuel injected by the electrical activity of the limbic system. Arousal triggered in the amygdala produces heightened sensitivity and increased attention. Okay, sure. The dilation of our pupils reveals that our vigilance systems have been put on high alert to look out for danger. The world suddenly becomes very clear. No, it doesn't. The world suddenly becomes very clear and enriched as we notice everything. Shut the fuck up. As we notice all manner of trivial details that we would not normally care about. It's like the scene has suddenly been illuminated by bright light, as if some paparazzi photographer has lit up the world in a brilliant blaze of light during our moments of terror, which is why these recollections are called flashbulb memories. And we experience the emotion. We feel the past. It is the heightened arousal and emotional significance that seems to lay down the life track in the brain that becomes a flashbulb memory. Shut the fuck up. We usually lament our loss of memory as we age, but sometimes it is better to forget. Although many flashbulb memories are associated with the more joyous events in life, such as births and weddings, most are generated Most are generated by the horrors. Victims and survivors typically experience traumatic memories that they can't erase, a common symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Following 9/11, 1 in 5 New Yorkers living in the vicinity of the Twin Towers developed PTSD. They were haunted by nightmares and constantly ruminated on the events of that terrible day. Our emotional systems seem compelled to never let us forget the worst things that can happen to us. In truth, the details of flashbulb memories can be as false as any other memory, but they just seem so accurate. Oh, I'm sorry, I was thinking about something else. In truth, details of flashbulb memories can be as false as any other memory, but they just seem so accurate. For example, many people, including George Bush, remember seeing the plane hit the first tower on 9/11, even though video footage did not emerge until much later. Maybe flashbulb memories serve some form of evolutionary value to always remember the worst case scenario. That's not what's that. When it comes to surviving, it would seem that Mother Nature has decided that it is more important to remember how we felt when endangered rather than when involved in the pleasures of life. Compelling, that sings. One way to combat PTSD is to administer a beta blocker such as propanolol. Propanolol? Propanolol? I don't feel like I've ever heard of that. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it because I know I've heard of whatever you're talking about. Propanolol. Propanolol. Now it just looks like the words laughing. Immediately after the event, Beta blockers dampen the arousal of the limbic system so that events are not encoded with the same degree of emotional kick. Okay, when you put this beta blocker in, okay. People still remember what happened, but feel less upset. Currently, research is underway at Yale Medical School by Deanne Aikens to determine whether propranolol alleviates PTSD in combat troops, and some have even suggested that the drug should be given to all soldiers. This raises concerns. Do we really want to have a moral morning after pill that shuts down a system that usually prevents us from doing things that might lead to remorse and regret? Yeah, but we're gonna do it anyway. No, okay, no, you're right. Some have even suggested giving propranolol to soldiers before they go into battle as a prophylaxis. If you have no pangs of guilt, then you would become immune to suffering. Meanwhile, humans think that they're souls. So they, okay. No, but they don't. They also know that drugs affect them. So, oh gosh. Oh, but guilt, that's like me. I wouldn't just not feel guilty. Maybe I would like do it, but I'd be like on autopilot and I'd probably be really suffering while I'm doing it. No, bro. No, bro. If you have no pangs of guilt, then you could become immune to suffering. But do we really want blind obedience without a moral compass in our soldiers? Great moral compass they have. Remember the lessons of Milgram and Abu Ghraib? Oh, remember the lessons of Milgram and Abu Ghraib. There's a big difference between inoculating against PTSD and helping those to overcome events out of their control and no fault of their own. This future of the psychopharmacological treatment of PTSD is a moral minefield. In any event, the scale of the emotional devastation created by 9/11. Bon voyage à toi, Michel. Yes, merci. In any event, the scale of the emotional devastation created by 9/11 was unlikely to be solved so easily with a pill, and certainly not for those who had managed to escape the collapsing towers. The survivors of 9/11 The survivors of 9/11 were left traumatized and tormented by their flashbulb memories. Initially, the nation joined them in their grief as everyone tried to comprehend the sheer horror of 9/11. But eventually, things started to return to normal. Memories started to fade and people wanted to move on, but not those who had been there. 2 years after the event, survivors sought each other out and gathered in small meetings to share their experiences, nightmares, and pain. There was a lot of guilt that they had survived and they needed to talk. Gary Bogach, who co-founded the Survivors Network, explained, "After a while, you can't talk about this anymore with your family. You've worn them out. Your need to talk is greater than their ability to listen." I need a white mate. The Survivors Network began to expand their meetings across Manhattan. More and more sought the solace and comfort of fellow survivors because only those who had undergone the same ordeal themselves could relate to the legacy left by 9/11. At these meetings, they would exchange stories, and with each retelling, it seemed to help unleash or ease the feelings and emotions that had been bottled up. Very soon, one particular story started to spread among the groups. It was the story of Tanya Head, who had survived the attack on the South Tower. She had been on the 78th floor, waiting for an elevator, when United Airlines Flight 175 slammed into her tower. Tanya had been badly burned by aviation fuel, but managed to crawl through the rubble and even encountered a dying man who handed her his wedding ring, which she later returned to his widow. She would be only one of 19 above the impact point who would survive that day. Tanya recalled how she was rescued by 24-year-old volunteer firefighter. How old is Tanya? We don't know. Tanya recalled how she was rescued by 24-year-old volunteer firefighter Wells Crowther, who always wore a red bandana. Witnesses say he was later killed, making his fourth return to the collapsing tower to save more victims trapped in the debris. But Tanya was not entirely without loss. Although she was saved, she later discovered that her fiancé, Dave, who had been in the North Tower, had been killed. The wedding for which she had bought her dress only weeks earlier was never to be. Like other survivors, Tanya needed to do something to deal with the emotional aftermath. She started an internet group for survivors, and eventually news of her efforts reached Gary Bogach, who invited her to join the Survivors Network. Tanya's story was noteworthy. She had lost more than most others, but somehow she found the courage and conviction to overcome adversity. Tanya's tale is oh my god, I hope it's not like, I hope there aren't some super dramatic details. I hope we're not going to be laughing at Tanya. Can you imagine she was in Indiana? Stop. Tanya's tale is a story of triumph. She offered hope to those who had been lost in the pits of despair. How could anyone wallow in self-pity when Tanya had managed to overcome her own loss? Soon Tanya was campaigning for the survivors. Their voice had to be heard. She championed the group's right to visit Ground Zero, the site of the collapsed towers, which up to that point had been off limits to all. She became the spokesperson for the Survivors Network and then their president. Oh gosh, where is this going? She gave the inaugural guided tour of the Tribute WTC Visitor Center in 2005 when she showed New York City Mayor Bloomberg, former Mayor Giuliani, former New York government Pataki, and other important dignitaries around the facility, regaling them with her experiences during that fatal day. Tanya had become the figurehead of 9/11 survivors, except ... Tanya had never been there. Well, you better adjust. They're going, oh, she's just a bitch who wanted attention. You better respond to them so I don't have to. Because I actually don't even have a response yet. Except Tanya had never been there. She did not have a false memory. Oh, she was a fraud. Okay, great. Okay, good. Okay. I thought he was going to say, this is the power. This is why we got to learn about psychology. Because nobody's going to be like, nobody's going to accept that they could do that. So, okay, good. She was a fraud. Okay. Tanya had never been there. So whatever I said earlier that I felt bad about, fuck you, Tanya. Tanya had never been there. Well, not fuck you. I mean, I guess I can imagine how the dominoes fell in that brain, and that's what you did. She did not have a false memory. She was a fraud. Like me, Tanya had watched the events on television back in her native Spain. She had not been in the South Tower. She did not work for Merrill Lynch. She had not been on the 78th floor of the World Trade Center. She had not crawled through rubble to retrieve a dying man's wedding ring. She had not been saved by a real hero, Wells Crowther, and she did not lose her fiancé Dave in the collapsed North Tower. Tanya was really Alicia Esteve Head, who only arrived in the United States in 2003, 2 years after 9/11. She had made everything up. Okay, why are we talking about her? However, the authorities could not arrest Tanya because she had not broken any law. In 2007, she disappeared, and in February 2008, a telegram was sent from a Spanish account to the Survivors Network informing them that Alicia Esteve had committed suicide. Not surprisingly, very few believe this. Alicia came from a wealthy Spanish background, but something must have been missing in her life that money could not buy. She needed attention and sympathy from others, and saw herself as the victim in a romantic tragedy set against the backdrop of the world's worst terrorist attack. As Tanya, Alicia would have lived out this lie if she had not been exposed. We'll probably never know exactly why she created this charade, but we must assume that this was the story she wanted to live. She may have come to even believe her own false memories, locked in her own fantasy world where she recast herself as a survivor against the odds. That's true. It's possible that she, like, you could be like, no, 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 hello, Tanya, 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 stop, 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 shut the fuck up, stop, shut the fuck up. You're in Spain, shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up. You're in Spain, and you could get some its to be like, all right, yeah, I was in Spain, but for a while you could be talking to her, come on, Tanya, and the only its you'd be hearing from are ones that have brought into the narrative. That really is possible. For the whole brain to buy into the narrative, maybe with like a very serious trauma in which some its have just been shut down. And that's and it's like there are literally departments in the brain that are just like, oh, we're done working, and so that's how they're able to be stuck on this narrative. But I don't think like a normal healthy brain without could whole brain could believe it. But really you could be talking to them, and in most senses of the word believe, maybe they do believe it. Anyway, section, we are our memories. What is a memory? Can you hold one? Can you make one? Can you copy a memory? If we are our memories, can we be recreated? Memory is information stored as a pattern of electrical activity that represents. There's a hyphen between the re and presents. If we are our memories, can we be recreated? Hyphen also. Memory is information stored as a pattern of electrical activity that represents the original pattern at the time it was formed. This representation is what memories are, although human memories are not rigid, but dynamic and continually changing as new information is encountered. If we are our brains, and our brains are a network of physical cells connected together in a pattern of weighted electrical activity, then it really should be possible to copy a memory in the same way we can copy any information. We should be able to copy ourselves. Okay, wrong, because we are not just our memories. But we can copy ourselves, but not just because we can copy memories, but because we can copy all the other shit too. And also, why do I feel like you're setting up to say that that's not the case? Because they're rooting for you right now, and I need you to come through and be like, yeah, so in the next 100 years, we'll probably be able to copy memories. You can save them and then reinstall them once they're sort of degraded and they've changed. Reinstall the original pattern. Oh, yeah. The possibility of copying memory is at the heart of what it is to be unique. Imagine a machine that can copy any physical object right down to its basic atomic structure. It can perfectly duplicate any material thing, irrespective of what it is made of or how complicated it is. Remarkably, engineers are working on precisely this type of machine, known as and this is in italics, 3D printer. 2012. They typically work using a laser to scan a target. Actually, I don't know how they work. They typically work using a laser to scan a target object to calculate its dimensions and then relay that information to a jet molding device. Oh, I do know this. Where liquid plastic is squirted in to gradually build up a reproduction of the object. It's a sort of technology that would make constructing colonies on distant planets more feasible without having physically to transport every object. At the moment, the technology is fairly crude, and solving how to build the internal structures of complicated objects made of different substances presents considerable challenges. The way he's talking about 3D printers, and my impression of 3D printers now and how sort of available and I feel like not crude they are, makes me rethink my saying in 100 years we'll be able to copy memories. Maybe about 15. Um, At the moment, the technology is fairly crude, and solving how to build the internal structures of complicated. No, yeah, I mean, all the little proteins on it. I mean, we're so far away. Yeah, now I'm thinking it should have been longer than 100, but let's stick with 100. How to build the internal structures of complicated objects made of different substances presents considerable challenges. However, just as the wooden block printing press of Johannes Gutenberg was considered a technological marvel of the 15th century and yet seems so primitive by today's standards, it may simply be a matter of time before we can reliably manipulate matter to create accurate duplicates. Whatever way we achieve it, let us assume that we have the technology to reliably duplicate anything. Imagine now that you step into the machine and an identical physical copy of you is created. What would this new you be like? You'd be like, holy shit, I just moved to this other machine. So is it a teleportation machine? Oh fuck. Oh fuck. You moved me to this machine and you left like a copy of my body behind? What the fuck are you talking about, bro? You're that this is amazing. You actually were just created. You are not me actually. About 5 minutes ago, I walked into that machine. I had was a little nervous, I remember, about the procedure and whether it would hurt me. I'm glad it didn't hurt me. Um, but I want to know what you are. You're not understanding, bro. It's what you are, bro. I'm the original, bro. Is this thing conscious? Because this he sounds just like me. Listen, buddy, I have had a steady flow of time here, a continuous stream of consciousness here. I was there, walked into that thing, and now here I am thinking about how I'm gonna get rid of you. This is so fucking crazy. So I was literally impressed that you're conscious. Whoa, what the fuck? Gosh, what an experience that would be, huh? All right, sorry, let's get back into it. Whatever way we achieve it, let us assume that we have the technology to reliably duplicate anything. Imagine now that you step into the machine and an identical physical copy of you is created. What would this new you be like? Let's also assume that you accept that there is no immaterial spirit. Let's pretend like it's not fucking the 21st century, okay? Let's pretend like we've got modern ideas and we don't play around with stupid um, immaterial spirit or soul that can't be reproduced and I'm a unique special angel bullshit. Let's also assume that you accept that there's no immaterial spirit or soul that can be reproduced. Would this identical copy be you? It's the sort of question that has entertained philosophers and writers in one form or another for centuries. Although in recent years, it has enjoyed a resurgence of interest because of rapid developments in technology such as gene sequencing and 3D printers. And also, yeah, we just fucking learned that we're brains. So now we realize it's a stupid question. Uh, I mean, in our time, in the 125th century, not in the 121st century, those dumbasses. This was what's funny is this book was actually written back in the 21st century. And you think of the 21st century as like, oh my gosh, those fucking idiots. They had no self awareness. They had no idea that they were brains. They literally thought that they were souls. They thought they were rational. All the bullshit that they came out of their mouths, they believed in. All the bullshit that was in here, they believed in. Even though and remember, and I know you know this, 3 centuries before they had learned about evolution. Um, and like material, you wouldn't believe they had they had basically the smartphones, but I mean they were like physical, like and metal and stuff like that. But anyway, but they basically had that, and so sometimes we get surprised. We think of a time everybody being homogenous, but no, as early as the 21st century, there were people publishing sentences like, let's also assume that you accept that there is no immaterial spirit or soul that cannot be reproduced. There was a crazy assumption, but it got published, and that kind of shows you that there were people who were getting it. Um, so anyway, Would this identical copy be you? It's the sort of question that has entertained philosophers and writers in one form or another for centuries. Although in recent years it has enjoyed a resurgence of interest because of rapid developments in technology such as gene sequencing and 3D printers. In all of these different scenarios, the same fundamental question of identity is raised. What makes us unique? John Locke thought about this issue in the context of reincarnation, something that was of interest in the 17th century when it came to the notion of the immortal soul. Locke was of the opinion that conscious awareness of one's own history was important when it came to unique personal identity. In short, he was thinking about the role of autobiographical memories in defining the self. Even if one does not believe in the immortal soul, modern adults also regard personal memory as the most important thing that defines who we are. In one study, adults were modern, by the way, remember this was written back in the 21st century. Um, in one study, adults were told about the unfortunate Jim, who was in a serious accident in which his body was irreparably damaged so that he needed a transplant. Only this was a science fiction story in which the transplantation was very advanced. Oh fuck, I seen the song? Now you're good. It was very, very advanced. What was the transplantation procedure? Transplantation was very advanced. In one version of the story, Jim had lost all his memories, but they could transplant his amnesiac brain into they could transplant his amnesic brain into either a robot or genetically engineered biological body. In another version of the story, doctors had managed to download all of Jim's life memories before his brain died and could transfer them to the replacement body. After the transplantation, Jim's original body was cremated. Adults were then asked if each operation was a success. Was the patient still Jim? All right, so in the first version, Jim had lost all his memories, but they could transplant his amnesic brain into, you could say for categories are bullshit. Like, that's what we need to use as human brains, simpler than reality. So for our intents and purposes, you can say that yes, in this first version, it is still Jim. I mean, it depends on what our intents and purposes are, because yeah, memory is pretty important. But nah, his family would still recognize him. And then in the other version, doctors have managed to download all of his memories. All you get is the memories. You don't get any of the taste, the preferences, the fuck. That's not Jim, bro. That's just another thinking system with Jim's memories. Like they had just watched the same movie, bro. So in the first version, yes, basically it's still Jim. In the second version, no, it's not still Jim. Oh, and I bet people tended to say that. Is that the intuitive answer? I bet people tend to say that. And so he's saying, so yeah, y'all were stupid for buying the whole we are our memories thing. After the transplantation, the most important thing that determined whether adults considered the patient to be Jim was whether his memories had been saved. So it was not intuitively obvious, irrespective of whether they were now stored in a mechanical body or a biologically engineered one. In fact, the biologically engineered body that contained Jim's original brain was considered less Jim than the robot with his memories. Dumbasses, huh? In the absence of his memories, Jim was gone. We're gonna call them dumbasses now, right? The relationship between memory and identity is an intuition that starts to emerge in children from around 4 to 5 years of age. We used duplication machine studies to see if children would think that a live hamster could be copied exactly and whether its doppelganger would have the same memories. To achieve the illusion of duplication, we used two identical-looking Russian hamsters that were indistinguishable to the untrained eye. Once children had been convinced by the power of the machine to faithfully duplicate any toy, we introduced our pet hamster and proceeded to tell children about some of the unique physical properties the hamster had that could not be directly seen. We said it had swallowed a marble in its tummy, had a broken back tooth, and had a blue heart. We then created some memories that were unique to the hamster. Of course, memories are also invisible, but they're not physical like marbles and blue hearts. Okay, not like marbles and blue hearts, but we showed the hamster a drawing by each we showed the hamster a drawing by each child, whispered the child's name into the hamster's ear, and got the child to tickle the hamster. Oh, these are the memories that I created. Okay, these are all episodes that can be stored in memory. We then placed the hamster in the duplicating machine, and after the buzzer sounded, we opened both boxes to reveal that there were now two identical hamsters. How old are these kids? 8, 4 to 5. The relationship between memory and identity is an intuition that starts to emerge in children around 4 to 5 years of age. But that's when theory of mind starts. How do you know they just didn't have theory of mind? So they were like, yeah, nigga, everybody's got that memory. Huh. Let me know in the comments. We then placed the hamster, blah, blah, blah. What would the children think? Would the invisible physical properties and the memories be the same or different for each animal? So we asked the child whether each hamster had a blue heart, a broken tooth, and a marble in its tummy. Okay, right? So they'll say yes to that and then no to the memories. Because that's the stupid intuition thing or something. What did you say about our memory intuition? Relationship between memory and identity is an intuition that starts to emerge. All right. So there's this intuition that we are our memories. So you're telling me that they're gonna. But what do you mean, like we're our unique our memories? But do they believe it was copied? I don't get it. Because if it was copied, then wouldn't. Is that weed? If it was copied, because I'm just expecting the child to be like, no. Well, I know that adults say, oh no, you can't copy an adult, or you can't copy a human. Okay. What would the children think? Would the invisible physical properties in the memories be the same or different for each animal? So we asked the children whether each animal had a blue heart, a broken tooth, and a marble in its tummy. We also asked about the memories. Did each hamster know the child's name and what picture the child drew and remember being tickled? What's your intuition? If you walked into the machine, would the duplicate of you have the same memories? Remember, this was written in the 21st century. So that's why there were readers back then who were like, oh. We conducted a straw poll online with 60 adults to get a sense of their intuition about duplicating hamsters and themselves in our machine. We asked whether the identical copy created by the machine would have the same body and memory. Around 4 out of 5 adults agreed that both the copied animal, 84%, and human, 80%, would have the same body. About half, 46%, thought the hamster would have the same memories, compared to just over a third when it came to the human, 35%. So overall, adults thought that bodies were more likely to be copied compared to memories, and this belief was stronger when related to humans compared to hamsters. What did children do? Back in the lab, we repeated the hamster study a number of times with variations to check the results, and found the same basic pattern. About 1/3 of children from 4 to 6 years of age thought that the second hamster was completely different on both mental and physical properties. They thought it were different, huh? Maybe they did not believe that the machine could copy something alive. Maybe part of them believed it. Another third thought that the second hamster was identical on all properties. So that's the theory of mind problem. That's a theory of mind issue. However, the interesting group was the remaining third of children who thought that the physical properties, but not the memories, were copied. Sure. In other words, they believed that the machine worked, but could not copy the mind, just as the adults did. Yo, that experiment shopes, bro. I don't know. Your explanation of that experiment, I'm just not feeling it. In another version, we found this uniqueness effect of memories was stronger when we gave our first hamster a name, suggesting that it really does have something to do with identity. Hold on. In another version, we found this uniqueness effect of memories was stronger when we gave our first hamster a name, suggesting that it really does have something to do with identity. It's remarkable how naming an animal confers a new sense of identity, which is why you should not name your livestock if you intend to eat your animals. The uniqueness and identity conferred by names also may explain why young children are often affronted when they first learn that they share their name with another child. I'm Sylvie. We think our findings show that children begin to appreciate. I don't, but I'm sorry. Um, I obviously don't know enough, and I do trust you. You have, so I'm sorry. We think our findings show that children begin to appreciate how minds and memories, in particular, create the unique individual. All right, yes. All right. I'm sorry. That was so stupid. All right. Let me do it again. We think our findings show that children begin to appreciate how minds and memories in particular, create the unique individual. Earlier, we saw that there is an increasing awareness of other people's mental states from 4 years of age, as shown by the theory of mind research. Initially, young children appreciate that other people have minds. As they develop, children come to increasingly appreciate the importance of their mind and the contents of their mind as being different to others and unique. By the time we are adults, most of us think that our autobiographical memories are crucial to our sense of self. Our bodies, oh man, no, bro. That's so misguided, bro. Gosh, what it would be like to be free of your memories and have like a fresh look at things. And then it would be cool to be able to go relive other perspectives and so on. But what's it like to be a bat? Earlier we saw that there is blah blah blah. By the time we are adults, most of us think that our autobiographical memories are crucial to our sense of self. Our bodies could be copied, but not our memories. Our memories are what make us who we are. Aside from the science fiction movies we have already discussed, anyone unfortunate enough in real life to witness the decline of a loved one with rapidly progressing dementia, which destroys memory, knows how the person's identity and sense of self can unravel. That loss of identity is one of the reasons why memory failure is considered such a traumatizing symptom for relatives, because the sufferer no longer recognizes those around him. Once again, neurologist Oliver Sacks reminds us of how we rely on others to create our sense of self-identity. I don't remember what else Oliver Sacks had said, so I'm gonna try to look that up. Search book. The Machiavellian Baby. Oliver Sacks, a neurologist, described how he once encountered a woman on the streets of New York who was compelled to copy. She described her experience predicting other behaviors to Oliver Sacks as being like an anthropologist on Mars. Maybe I should have just typed Sacks. Whatever. Once again, stop doing the back to 192. We are not doing 192. We are here. We are very much here. Once again, neurologist Oliver Sacks reminded us of how we rely on others to create our sense of self-identity. One of his patients, a former grocer called William Thompson, had Korsakoff syndrome, which produced a profound amnesia so that he was unable to remember anything for more than a second or two, just like Clive Wearing, whom we encountered earlier. He lived in the eternal present and was unable to generate a stable sense of self. In one exchange, Sacks walked onto the ward in a white coat to see William, who greeted him. "Well, what'll it be today?" he says, rubbing his hands. "What'll it be today?" "Half a pound of Virginia, a nice piece of Nova." Evidently, he saw me as a customer. This is Sacks telling the story. Evidently, he saw me as a customer. He often would pick up the phone on the ward and say, "Thompson's Delicatessen." Sorry, so he went into the psych ward, walked onto the ward in a white coat to see William, who greeted him. And William goes, "What'll it be today?" Oh, it's still William talking. "What'll it be today? Half a pound of Virginia, a nice piece of Nova." Evidently, he saw me as a customer. He often would pick up the phone on the ward and say, "Thompson's Delicatessen." "Oh, Mr. Thompson," I exclaim. "And who do you think I am?" "Good heavens, the light's bad." I took you for a customer, as if it isn't my old friend Tom Pitkins. Me and Tom. He whispers in an aside to the nurse. Me and Tom was always going to the races together. Um, Mr. Thompson, you are mistaken again. So I am, he rejoins, not put out for one moment. Why would you be wearing a white coat if you were Tom? You're Jaime, the kosher butcher next door. No bloodstains on your coat, though. Business bad today. You look like a slaughterhouse by the end of the week. It was as if, this is now back to Bruce Hood talking. It was as if William reeled effortlessly from one self reflected identity to the next, depending on who he thought Sachs was. He was oblivious to his circumstances. He had no awareness that he was a Korsakoff's patient, a psychiatric hospital, but rather, as Sachs put it, had to literally make himself and his world up every moment. Unlike the woman with Tourette syndrome, who could not stop incorporating the mannerisms of others, William used the identity of those around him to create his own identity. How has that been demonstrated with this story? Section Being in Two Minds. Constructing a plausible story is known as say it. Good job. Confabulation, and is found in various forms of dementia as the patient attempts to make sense of his or her circumstances. Remember TH, who could not recognize himself in the mirror and thought his reflection belonged to his neighbor who had snuck into the house? However, we can all confabulate to some extent, even though we are not aware we are doing this. These produce the biases, selective interpretations, reframing, and cognitive dissonance processes in which we are less objective than usual. Shut the fuck up. We are all naturally inclined to interpret the world in terms of meaningful stories, and this probably reflects the activity of a system known as the interpreter. I don't know how these are going to end up being published, but hey, I'm referencing. I'm not. Um, I'm just saying, like, right now with these words. This is a performative reference. I am referencing the videos of the dash cam footage where we listen to the audio, but I hope the audio is good. Of the other self book that we're reading, which and has some great stuff about the interpreter from Echo 24 Echo probably. Yep. Yesterday. The interpreter, which appears to be localized to the left hemisphere. We are not aware of the system normally, as our brain processes are effortlessly and invisibly integrated below its levels of awareness. We simply experience the output of the interpreter as our conscious appraisal of our situations, our thoughts, and our behaviors. After all, we are our minds. And if that is largely constructed by unconscious processes, why should we ever become aware of the so-called interpreter? However, the activity of the interpreter was revealed by neuroscientist Michael, according to how it's pronounced on the audiobook, Gazaniga, I forget, in his research on split brain patients. The normal brain is really a tale of two cities on the left and the right. Gazaniga demonstrated that you could reveal the autonomy of the two hemispheres by selectively feeding different information to each. To do this, he presented words and images on the left and right side of a computer screen while the patient stared at a spot in the middle. This ensured that each hemisphere processed stimuli on the opposite side, and because they were no longer connected, split brain patients, to each other through the corpus callosum, there was no exchange of information. For example, if the words key and ring were briefly flashed in the left and right halves of the screen respectively, key, ring, the patient reported seeing the word ring, because this was processed by the opposite left hemisphere that controls language. However, if the patient was asked to choose the corresponding object from a selection on the table, he would pick up a key with the left hand. That was Port seeing the word ring. I thought I had misread. Okay. But then he would, with his left hand, he'd pick up a key that was controlled by the right hemisphere. Experiment after experiment revealed that the two hemispheres were functioning independently of each other. Yeah, and then you could also, I guess because there's so many structures that are bilateral, it's possible to actually sever that. But I don't want us to think it's like a hemisphere thing. It's just that that's somewhere where it's actually possible to pretty neatly separate. You can't like neatly separate the frontal lobe, for instance, from the rest of the brain, or this neuronal tract from the rest of the brain, because then you would just lose all like function, or like lose that function. Um, but we are modules. It's just that the only modules that are easy to see are the two hemispheres. But no, you separate communication and that's why we're so crazy, because we have these we're not integrated, and so there are all kinds of communication issues and misattribution and all that. All right. Experiment after experiment revealed that the two hemispheres were functioning independently of each other. In one study, a naked man was flashed into the right hemisphere, causing the female patient to laugh, but not be able to say what it was she was finding amusing. Her left hemisphere was unaware of the naked man, and so could not explain what was amusing. Sometimes, however, the patients make up a story to make sense of their unconscious activity. In one classic example, no, the left brain makes up a story to make sense of the right brain activity, or of the unknown activity. I hate the C word, bro. In one classic example, told by Gazzaniga, one of his split-brain patients, Paul, was shown a snow scene in his left visual field and a picture of a chicken foot in his right visual field, and asked to choose the correct image from a selection on the table. He picked out a picture of a shovel with his left hand and a picture of the chicken foot with his right. When his attention was drawn to the discrepancy, and he was asked why he had chosen two different images, Paul replied, "Oh, that's simple. The chicken claw goes with the chicken, and you need the shovel to clean out the chicken shit." Gazzaniga has proposed that there are not two separate minds or selves in these split brain patients. Rather, the mind is a product of the mental processes of the brain that are shared across the two hemispheres. Rather, the mind is a product of the mental processes of the brain that are shared across the two hemispheres. Gazzaniga has proposed that there are not two separate minds or selves in these split brain patients, right? Rather, the mind is a product of the mental processes of the brain that are shared across the two hemispheres. But like I said, it doesn't have to be just across the two hemispheres. That's me anyway, Dica Sine Quadra. Language has the advantage of providing the narrative output. So the interpreter in the left hemisphere is able to articulate a coherent account to integrate the different pieces of information. Normally, these processes, these processes, I guess are a collaborative effort with information streaming in from all the different processing regions. But in the split brain patient, no shared communication is possible. Presented with the choices of the right hemisphere that are inconsistent with the information in the left, the interpreter reconciles the difference with a plausible story. And the other author talked about that same thing. So if I ran through that, you can see in the other one. What the split brain studies reveal is that the self-illusion is really the culmination of a multitude of processes. Yes. These usually work together in synchrony to produce a unified self, but when inconsistencies arise, the system, strongly influenced by language, works to reestablish coherence. Probably one of the most compelling examples of this process comes from a personal anecdote that Gazzaniga tells that comes from the late Mark Rayport, a neurosurgeon from Ohio. I still want to know why we talked about Tanya Head. During one operation on a patient in which Rayport was stimulating the olfactory bulb, the brain region associated with smell, the patient reported experiencing different aromas depending on the context. Hold on. During one operation on a patient in which Rayport was stimulating the olfactory bulb, the brain region associated with smell, the patient reported experiencing different aromas depending on the context. When the patient was asked to reminisce about a happy time, I just had a weird smell. When the patient was asked to reminisce about a happy, I probably didn't, obviously. Nothing new entered here. It's just some brain activity. When the patient was asked to reminisce about a happy time in his life, stimulation of the region produced the sensation of roses. Factory bulb. I don't know. Rayport then asked the patient to think about a bad time in his life. This time, stimulation of the same cluster of neurons produced the sensation of rotten eggs. This anecdote suggests that the neural networks of the brain store associations that fit together into a coherent story. In many ways, confabulation in the patient unaware of the true nature of his surroundings or disrupted brain processes is the same storytelling we all use to make sense of the inconsistencies that punctuate our lives days when we deviate from the normal storyline of what we believe we are ourselves. One more time. In many ways, confabulation in the patient, unaware of the true nature of his surroundings or disrupted brain processes, is the same storytelling we all use to make sense of the inconsistencies that punctuate our lives when we deviate from the normal storyline of what we believe we are ourselves. Section Know Thyself. Psychologist Dan McAdams proposes that when it comes to making sense of our lives, we create narrative or personal myths to explain where we have come from, what we do, and where we are going. This is the narrative arc of our lives, the background, the struggle, the climax, and resolution that people readily attribute to the story of their lives. Hungry, bro. I want to keep reading though. Can we just cut up some potatoes? Don't feel like doing all that. All right. This is the narrative arc of our lives. The background, struggle, climax, and resolution that people readily attribute to the story of their lives. For example, some may see themselves as victims of circumstances beyond their control, reinterpreting events to fit with this perspective. Another could take the same set of circumstances and cast herself as the resilient heroine triumphing over adversity to get where she is today. Presumably, these myths reflect the influences of culture and those close to us when it comes to providing a meaning to our lives. Okay, oh gosh, it can be, oh my gosh. My heart is sinking for all the people who the story that they have of their lives told by the people around them, especially those who failed according to 21st century standards, um, and the stories that they believe about themselves and their value and what they're able to do and what they're doing and why they're doing it and blah blah blah. Also, and then people who have addiction issues. I'm not faulting the people who told these folk some myths that were pretty detrimental to the people, and the people bought those myths. Not faulting them, but I'm just imagining a future when we have critical recognition and we are really careful about our interpretations of stories we tell, because we know how much humans are going to use these things for their own story. I had that instinct, but I was also kind of resistant to it in a sense. So it was like a real battle, and very confusing. You're telling me this, I just don't have. I have evidence for this other thing, but you're telling me this, and I want to believe you. I mean that sounds good to me. I don't know what's going on. Oh, we're telling you how it's coming up. Presumably, these myths reflect the influences of culture and those close to us when it comes to providing a meaning to our lives. These accounts are myths because they are not grounded in reality, but rather follow a well-worn narrative path of a protagonist character, ourself, and what the world throws at them. It's in some. Hey, 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 hey. In some individuals, the reality is complete fantasy, as in the case of Tanya Head. Our self centered way of constructing the story means that we only pay attention to those events as we see them being related to us. This personal myth is constantly being revised and updated throughout our life. I can't even read this. By both conscious and unconscious processes. What do you mean? Processes that the brain engages with more and processes that kind of happen in the brain but don't make a lot of noise? And it reemerges at times either through deliberate retelling to others to explain who we are, or at times of insight. And so it's so important, the story that you tell, yeah. Or at times of insight when something from our past seems to become surprisingly poignant or relevant. Even cultures continually recycle the same old stories in the form of myths. For example, Star Wars may have been set in the future, but is just as much a Greek myth as Homer and the Iliad. We like stories that are about journeys and conflicts, with goodies and baddies. The same is true for our own personal stories. The problem with self narratives is that we are the ones writing the story, which means our myths are open to all manner of distortions of what we think we should be like. This has been called the totalitarian ego, in which we repress, distort, and ignore negative aspects of our lives that do not fit with our idealized self narrative. I got to read that again on mushrooms. I can see it. I don't get. I don't get it. I know. I have a glimpse of that idea, that concept. If I read that again on with some psilocybin, oh boy, I'd feel like I really got it. We repress, distort, and ignore negative aspects of our lives that do not fit with our idealized self narrative. For example, we tend to remember information that fits with our idealized self and conveniently ignore that which does not. If we believe that we have a particular trait or personality, then we selectively interpret events that are consistent with that belief. In fact, we can easily interpret general statements to make them seem particularly relevant to us. For example, how accurate is this description to your personality? Bertram 4, the Forer effect. And the other thing is the Barnum effect. Okay, but yeah, this is the Forer effect. Okay. I skipped ahead to read his name. You have a great need for other people to like and admire you. Hey. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess kind of why I'm doing the channel. Yeah. You have a tendency to be critical of yourself. Sure, yeah. Yeah, that's so me, dude. You have a great deal of unused capacity, which you have not turned to your advantage. Totally, Brad. Well, I mean, that could have been me, but nah, bro. I'm doing my thing. But yeah, no, totally. You have a great deal of unused capacity, which you have not turned to your advantage. Right, right. While you have some personality weaknesses, you are generally able to compensate for them, right? Disciplined and self-controlled outside, you tend to be worrisome and insecure inside. At times, you have serious doubts as to whether you have made the right decision or done the right thing. You prefer a certain amount of change and variety and become dissatisfied when hemmed in by restrictions and limitations. You pride yourself as an independent thinker and do not accept other statements without satisfactory proof, right? You have found it unwise to be too frank in revealing yourself to others. At times, you are extroverted, affable, sociable, while at other times, you are introverted, wary, reserved. They don't see that about you, right? Some of your aspirations tend to be pretty unrealistic, if we're being honest. Security is one of your major goals in life. Spookily accurate, isn't it? In 1948, and I bet there are some changes. I don't know exactly what they were, but there are some changes, I think, in just the vocabulary that would make it sing more and be like, yeah, it is. But I think we might be a little bit distracted by some of the vocabulary. Spookily accurate, isn't it? In 1948, psychologist Bertram Forer gave a personality test to his students and then provided them with an individual analysis based on their performance. In fact, every student got the description above as their unique analysis. Just about everyone thought the analysis was an accurate description, but Forer had, in fact, assembled the analysis from various different horoscopes to prove that the descriptions were sufficiently general as to apply to most people. This effect known as the Barnum effect. Okay. I'm about to say the same thing. Okay, I got you. This effect known as the Barnum effect after the showman, Hugh Jackman, who famously quipped, "We've got something for everyone," shows that our self-stories are probably more similar than we imagine. Also, the Barnum effect is particularly strong when the analysis contains many positive traits, self-serving bias, right, that support the inherent bias most of us hold. Most of us think that we are funnier, smarter, better looking, and kinder than the average person, which is, of course, statistically impossible. Some of us have to be less funny, not me. Less clever, not me. Less beautiful. Yeah, I'm not feeling actually super beautiful. And crueler, not me, to balance up the sums. The Barnum effect reveals that we all entertain illusions of a unique self, I am unique though, which turns out to be remarkably consistent and familiar between different people. Our uniqueness is closer to the average than we think. Not me though. Also, if you look at the sort of generic statements in Forrest's description, most are all to do with how we think others perceive us, social anxieties and concerns, that we are more complicated than others realize. I am more complicated than others trust. Again, this is more damning evidence that most of us are preoccupied with what others think and less independent than we imagine. In case you're very premier degré, that might be a good teaching technique to like demonstrate and then to like, that would be actually really cool. You do an interview I do an interview in the street, and I basically talk about how, you know, other humans are biased, you know, and I'm not, but I can, uh, I'm actually rational, and other people have biases like the illusion of comprehension, the blind spot or blind sight or whatever bias, the Dunning-Kruger. Other people have all these like crazy biases. I'm just trying to spread awareness, and also set an example of someone that doesn't have any biases and is perfectly rational. Again, if you're very premier degré, the idea, no, you'll figure it out. So the idea is, and then maybe for some people would just be, oh man, yeah, okay, fine, you're more rational than everybody else and we're out here being stupid. Gosh, you're so arrogant. But they'd be using arrogant not in the sense that they think I'm overestimating my abilities, but in that I'm bragging about actual abilities. But some people might go, wait a minute, you're saying that other humans are ignorant to their own biases, the blind spot bias, and you're saying you don't have that bias though. But isn't that what somebody with that bias would say? I should have $100 in my pocket if anyone says anything like that. And not in like, but what if they're super hostile? Someone could think of that. If they're really mad at me, they would think of that. But, and then it's just about trying to take me down a peg. Because they wouldn't do it if I was a little girl or something. Anyway, all right, I'm sorry, I don't know. Anyway, okay. That would be really interesting, so let's keep that in mind. Let's just write it down then. So I have to be the way that I see them, basically. I have to just be me without any humility, without any, like, Oh, but that's just a thought that my brain had that happened here. I should be like, I'm reasonable. I'm so fucking tired of you humans not like waking up and being rational and thinking clearly. You guys just want to cover your eyes and you guys just feel more, bunch of shit, stupid shit like that. And you guys don't care about anybody else. I'm lucid. I'm awake. I see there are problems in the world. I'm actually seeing things clearly. Everybody else is burying their head in the sand and nobody's thinking clearly. I mean, we're humans. We have conscious awareness, and yet we were asleep. We're humans, we have, free will to be able to investigate something, learn about something, understand something. But, instead, people are like choosing to like think in biased ways, and it's like, hello. Oh yeah, I can nail it. Okay, I won't be able to keep a straight face though, so I'd feel disgusted with myself. But anyway, be the Dunning-Kruger guy, but not too crazy. I mean, you want to hope that because the idea is that they go, "Oh, is that what that looks like?" Because he does sound super intelligent, and he sounds pretty reasonable. But the more he keeps saying that other people have this blind spot bias, the more I'm wondering, what if is it possible that someone can look, sound reasonable, intelligent, all that, but still not like be aware of, or you know what I'm trying to say, right? Like, I want them to see. No, because I have to not be acting like a fool about it. I have to be. Yeah. So we have these biases that we found out, and like the blind spot bias, and that's what's so dangerous. Everybody's biased, except for me. That's like saying in a not stupid way. I have to say, like, most of us. There are very, very few people who are actually able to maintain their rationality. I have to sound not too conspiratorial, but I still have to, I guess, blame it on something. Say there's some reason that people aren't using their default state of rationality. And then maybe the person, I just want the person to go, wait a minute. What if there isn't a default state of rationality? $100, take it. Brilliant, you got it. That's what I've been waiting for someone to say. Great. The Barnum section, Swimming in the Ocean. Although the Barnum effect reveals that we share many beliefs and attitudes, we are clearly not clones of each other, like aphids or other simple organisms. When we describe different people, we come up with varied accounts that emphasize those characteristics that we think are most notable. Even babies are not identical. Yeah, but also what we choose to recount, the story we weave. So yes, people are different, but also we weave different stories with different people. So two people could be exactly the same, and we are born with different temperaments and form varying patterns of social attachment that appear to be strongly influenced by continual interaction with the environment. In short, we believe in the concept of personality, a stable set of characteristic styles of behaving, thinking, and feeling that define us as individuals. He's setting us up again, see. Assessing personality is a major industry, backed up by decades of research showing that some people are better suited to particular occupations. The science of personality. Oh, I'm not going to remember to do this. Well, and this can just be a little point of trivia that I remember that he didn't do this, or a little gaff, little blooper. I put it on the blooper reel. Now, watch this clip of Tilda Swinton talking about identity. She says she doesn't believe in identity. Now watch that. Assessing personality is a major industry backed up by decades of research showing that some people are better suited to particular occupations. The science of personality can be traced back as far as the Greek scholar Theophrastus. circa 371 to circa 287 before that BCE, who described his fellow Athenians in terms of a limited number of characters. Okay, got it. Oh, she's such a Miranda. Oh, she's such a Sam. Oh, she's such a Jessica. No, I know it doesn't matter. But, I'm just feeling good, and I don't want this to bother me. Come on. Daphne. Oh. Carrie. Okay. More recently, psychologists have argued that personality is the culmination of a combination of 5 distinct traits, or the Big Five model of openness, the willingness to try new and imaginative experiences, so me, conscientiousness, the extent of self-disciplined organization. Bro, I know you're going to think this is a stretch. My friend once said that my computer is better organized than like a Fortune 500 company, so. Extroversion, the extent of social gregariousness. Agreeableness, the willingness to help others. And neuroticism, the extent of insecure, self-centered worry. OCEAN for short. The Big Five approach is one of the most commonly used measures of personality assessment to predict how happy people are with their lives, the quality of social relationships, life expectancy, and even job success and satisfaction. With such high praise for the With such high praise for the Big Five, one might be tempted to conclude that personality psychologists have dispelled the self-illusion that there is indeed a core personality that defines each of us. And what do we have to say to them? Shut the fuck up. However, in seeking to find stable measures of the Big Five, personality theorists have ignored the variation in the OCEAN scores that can come about by changes in the different situations and roles we adopt. Oh shit. Is that bad for my... Why did I not understand that I was plugged into that? Oh my gosh. For example, students were asked to consider themselves in 5 roles that they typically occupy at that time in their life: as a student at college, as a temporary employee working to put themselves through college, as a friend of other students, as a child of their parents, and as a romantic partner. They were then assessed on the OCEAN measures, which revealed both inconsistency and consistency in their personality. Okay. The inconsistency was that individuals varied on their self-assessment of OCEAN measures over the different roles they imagined themselves in. But as a group, they were consistent on which personality factors were most prominent in each role. The inconsistency was that individuals varied on their self-assessment of OCEAN measures over the different roles they imagined themselves in. So, okay, well, if I'm as the child of my parents, I'm more I'm high on OCEAN, not on openness, low on extrovertism. But then as when I'm with my sorority sisters, probably say I'm definitely, honestly, I feel so good with them. I'm so low on neuroticism and really high on extroversion. Okay. But as a group, they were consistent on which personality factors were most prominent in each role. Oh yeah, totally. I agree with what she said. Extroversion is good. It's going to be a prominent personality factor, like when you're a boss. Okay. On the Big Five measures, respondents were consistently most open, italics, to experience when they were in the role of the romantic partner. Most conscientious in the employee role, most extroverted when they were in the friend role, least agreeable in the student role, and most neurotic in the student role. These findings indicate that although the big... All right, hold on. Give me 2 seconds. What do you let them soak in water or something? I like the flavor of dirt. A little bit, but not too much. I have a sensitive palate. In other words, people are not necessarily consistent in all aspects of their lives. This is why you can live with someone who is fastidious at work when it comes to detail, but hopelessly disorganized when it comes to the domestic situation. This influence of context on the self has been shown this is why blah, blah, blah. This influence of context on the self. Oh, yeah. I guess it's going to be hard to read, huh? Oh, it's going to be very hard to read. Or I can read, it's going to be hard to keep my fingers. If we move it closer, can I see? Okay. Are we ready? Oh, are we ready? Oh. Okay, can we read now? Okay. This influence of context on the self has been shown over and over again. In one classic study, Princeton theology students were asked to present a sermon on the Good Samaritan in a building across campus. If they were told that they were running late, only 1 in 10 stopped to help a sickly man in a doorway on their way to the meeting, compared to 6 out of 10 who were not in a hurry. What were they thinking? Clearly nothing about the message of the sermon. How do they deal with such inconsistencies? The answer is that we easily use our cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance resolution. Why is she holding that broom like that? What the fuck is she doing? What the fuck is she hitting? Oh, a rat. Just let that rat go somewhere. You're not gonna kill it with your broom, lady. Hold on. Can you see? I don't know what you can see, but you can't really check with you.